The calm waters of the East China Sea, often a symbol of tranquility and natural beauty, stretched out under the soft glow of dawn. For centuries, these waters have been a vital lifeline for fishermen and traders, connecting nations and cultures across East Asia. But on December 2nd, 2025, this peaceful seascape was shattered by a sudden and dramatic confrontation, a tense standoff between China and Japan that would capture the world's attention. The flashpoint was the disputed Senkaku Islands known as Diaoyu in China, a cluster of rocky islets that have long been a source of friction between the two countries. That morning, several Coast Guard ships from both nations converged near the islands after two Chinese vessels approached a Japanese fishing boat operating in the area. The Japan Coast Guard responded swiftly and decisively, maneuvering their ships to form a protective barrier between the Chinese vessels and the vulnerable fishing boat. Their goal was clear: prevent any escalation and ensure the safety of their citizens at sea. For hours, the opposing Coast Guard ships shadowed each other in a tense and silent display of resolve. Over loudspeakers, both sides issued stern warnings, each refusing to yield ground or show weakness. The crews, trained for such high-stakes encounters, remained on high alert, knowing that even a minor misstep could have dire consequences. The risk of a miscalculation was palpable. With ships maneuvering in close quarters and national pride on the line, one wrong move, a collision, a misunderstood signal, or a sudden escalation, could have triggered a major international crisis, drawing in not just China and Japan, but potentially their allies as well. Eventually, after hours of tense posturing, the Chinese ships withdrew from the immediate area, yet they did not retreat far. Instead, they lingered just outside Japan's territorial waters, a calculated move that signaled their ongoing claim to the disputed zone and their willingness to return at any moment. The Japanese fishing crew, though visibly shaken, was unharmed and grateful for the swift intervention. News of the incident spread rapidly, sending shockwaves through both Tokyo and Beijing. In government offices and city streets, anxiety grew as officials and citizens alike wondered what the next move might be. This was more than just a close call at sea. It was a calculated challenge, a test of resolve that underscored the fragility of peace in these contested waters. The incident highlighted how quickly a routine patrol or a fishing expedition could spiral into a dangerous confrontation with far-reaching consequences. Around the world, governments and analysts watched closely, reminded once again of how disputes in the East China Sea can threaten not only regional stability, but also the broader balance of power in Asia. The standoff became headline news, sparking debates about maritime law, sovereignty, and the risks of military escalation. As dusk fell and the ships finally dispersed, the immediate crisis was over. But beneath the surface, the underlying tensions remained unresolved, a stark reminder that in these waters, peace is always fragile, and the next close call may be just over the horizon. In the aftermath, China and Japan raced to frame the incident in their favor. Beijing called it a lawful response to a Japanese vessel illegally entering Chinese waters, insisting their Coast Guard was simply upholding sovereignty. Japan countered, accusing China of intruding into its territory and threatening its citizens, framing their own actions as necessary protection. Each side blamed the other, presenting themselves as the aggrieved party. These dueling narratives deepened the divide, with both governments rallying domestic and international support. The same event became two irreconcilable stories, each reinforcing national claims. The truth was lost in translation, as both sides dug in. The maritime clash was fueled by weeks of escalating rhetoric. In November, Japanese Prime Minister Sane Takaichi hinted at possible military support for Taiwan, crossing a red line for Beijing. China saw this as a grave provocation and responded with fury, viewing it as interference in its core interests. Takaichi's hawkish stance marked a sharp break from past Japanese leaders, raising tensions across the region. In this charged atmosphere, China's Coast Guard presence near the disputed islands was a direct message. Japan's words have consequences. Political posturing had set the stage for confrontation at sea. The standoff's impact rippled far beyond the water, sending shockwaves through diplomatic circles and global markets alike. What began as a tense maritime confrontation quickly escalated into a full-blown international incident, drawing the attention of governments, businesses, and ordinary people across Asia and beyond. In response, China retaliated with a series of swift measures, issuing travel warnings to its citizens, canceling long-planned cultural exchanges, and suspending high-profile events that were meant to foster goodwill between the two nations. Most notably, China renewed and expanded its ban on Japanese seafood imports, a move that struck at the heart of Japan's fishing industry and sent shockwaves through local economies dependent on exports. These economic measures were unmistakable signals. Political defiance would be met with real, tangible financial pain. Japanese businesses, from bustling seafood markets to major exporters, felt the immediate sting as orders dried up and uncertainty grew. Despite mounting pressure, Japan stood firm, defending its actions on the world stage and lodging formal protests through diplomatic channels. Officials insisted their policies were justified, even as the costs mounted. At home and abroad, the Japanese government faced growing scrutiny. Citizens anxiously followed the news, while international observers questioned how far each side would go. The fallout forced both nations to reconsider their strategies, weighing the risks of escalation against the need to defend national interests. Behind closed doors, negotiators searched for a way forward, but trust was in short supply. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens and small businesses bore the brunt of the standoff. Once busy shopping streets grew quiet, and the absence of tourists was felt in every corner of the economy. For many, politics had suddenly become personal, disrupting daily routines and livelihoods on both sides of the sea. The dispute was no longer just about ships and islands. It had become a test of national resolve, pride, and the willingness to endure hardship for the sake of principle. As the economic and diplomatic costs continued to mount, both China and Japan faced a sobering reality. The price of confrontation was growing, and the world was watching to see who would blink first. The December standoff was just the latest in a series of confrontations. China has ramped up its patrols around the islands, using gray zone tactics to challenge Japan's control without open conflict. Incidents like this have become routine, with Chinese vessels growing bolder and more aggressive. Japan's Coast Guard is stretched thin, forced into a constant state of alert. Each encounter raises the risk of an accident that could spiral out of control. For China, the goal is to normalize its presence. For Japan, every intrusion is a violation that must be met. The cycle of action and reaction has become a dangerous new normal. Why fight over barren rocks? At first glance, these tiny windswept islands seem insignificant, just remote outcrops battered by the sea, with no permanent residents and little vegetation. But beneath their rugged surfaces lies a story of power, pride, and potential that has drawn the attention of two of Asia's biggest powers. The Senkaku Diaoyu Islands sit atop potential oil and gas reserves, resources that could fuel economies for decades. Their location is equally crucial. They lie near some of the world's busiest shipping lanes, through which trillions of dollars in trade flow every year. Whoever controls these waters holds a strategic advantage in both energy and commerce. For China, reclaiming the islands is about righting historical wrongs and restoring national pride. The memory of past humiliations and lost territories runs deep, and the islands have become a rallying point for patriotic sentiment and a symbol of China's resurgence on the world stage. For Japan, it's about upholding the rule of law, maintaining territorial integrity, and resisting what it sees as coercion from a rising neighbor. The islands are a test of Japan's resolve to defend its sovereignty and its place in the international order. Both sides see the islands as more than just land. They are powerful symbols of sovereignty, national identity, and the right to self-determination. The dispute has become a matter of national honor, fueling public passion and political rhetoric on both sides. The conflict is driven by a complex mix of history, economics, and the fear that any concession will be seen as weakness, potentially inviting further challenges. Decades of mistrust and competing narratives have only deepened the divide. Control here means more than just territory. It means influence over regional security, the ability to monitor and shape trade, and a seat at the table in shaping Asia's future. Neither side is willing to back down, and every diplomatic meeting, naval patrol, or media headline adds to the tension. The possibility of miscalculation or escalation is ever present, making compromise elusive and the stakes even higher. In the end, the contest over these islands is about far more than rocks in the sea. It's about power, prestige, and the future balance of power in East Asia, a struggle that could shape the region for generations to come. The China-Japan standoff is a flashpoint for the entire Indo-Pacific. The US-Japan alliance means any conflict could draw in the world's top military power. China's assertiveness here mirrors its actions in the South China Sea, raising alarms across Asia. The risk of miscalculation is ever present, with ships and aircraft operating dangerously close. A minor incident could escalate rapidly with global consequences. Despite tensions, both nations know that open conflict would be disastrous. Dialogue, crisis management, and restraint are urgently needed to prevent disaster. The future of regional peace may depend on what happens next in these contested waters.